Welcome back, everybody. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to build an if statement in PowerShell so your code can make decisions. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Yoder, and I have delivered over 200 PowerShell classes. So I've had a lot of experience with the questions people bring me, and one of them, of course, is when it comes to coding. Because a lot of people who manage a network never took a college course or any course on how to write software. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through some of the PowerShell constructs or programming constructs to help you understand a little bit of how to use them. And we're going to keep things pretty basic. We're going to start off with some code, and we're going to be implementing the if statement at a very, very basic level. Here's the if statement we're going to be looking at. To start off an if statement, you use the keyword if, and then in parentheses, you do some type of an operation that equates to either true or false. And then here is our statement. Now, if this particular condition equates to true, we will execute what's in the statement, what's inside those curly braces, those French braces. But if it's false, we'll just ignore it and move on to the next line of code. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and run this code. And because 1 is equal to 1, we can see that the condition is true. But what if it is false? So if we take a look at this next one, 1 is not equal to true. So when I run this statement is not executed because it is false. Let's take a look at a little more practical example. Here I'm going to collect an object from the Common Information Model's operating system class. Now I'm going to pull some of those properties out. You can see we have a caption, which is Microsoft Windows 11 Pro. You can see the version number and the name of the particular operating system that we're using here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work off of the caption property. So if the operating system's caption, and you can see right there the value is Microsoft Windows 11 Pro. I'm going to say that if it's like, that turns on wildcard characters. If it's Microsoft wildcard, then we execute this code, and you can see welcome to Windows. The statement portion of the if statement is a code block, which means it doesn't have to be one line of code. It could be 10,000 lines of code. Take a look. Here you can see the same code, but this time I have multiple lines of code inside of my two curly braces, inside of this code block. So everything between these will run if this condition is true. Let's go ahead and give it a try. And you can see it wrote welcome to Windows, and it executed the command get volume, which you put inside of the statement portion of an if statement. Can be very simple or it can be very advanced. We also have the ability to say, okay, if this statement wasn't true, how about this? And we do this through what is called an ElseIF statement. Here in our statement, we already know that the caption is not like Linux. So what we're saying here is we're going to be using this else if. Now the else if cannot start things off. You have to start with the if statement. And else if is completely optional. And what it does is it gives me a list of other conditions that I can evaluate. I can have as many else if statements as I need. In this case, we're going to have 2 else if statements. So let's see what happens when we execute these. Now, the first if statement was false, so we don't see welcome to Linux. The second else if statement was true, and that's why we see welcome to Windows. There is another optional component called else. Else is always at the end, and we only use else if we say, okay, if this isn't true, none of these are true, then I need something to happen. And that's where the else statement comes into play. In this example, my if statement is going to be false. My 2 else if statements are also going to be false. And that is going to bring into play the else statement. Now, what you're going to notice about this is that there's no conditional operation here. The else statement doesn't do any evaluations. The only way it becomes true and executes is if everything above it is false. That's the only way it executes. Let's go ahead and execute our code and see what happens. And in this case, you can see the else statement has executed. It says, I have no idea what your OS is. We can also do very complex decision making using our logical operators of AND, OR, XOR, and NOT. Let's take a look. Again, I'm going to keep these examples very basic. So what we have here is the statement to be evaluated. And I actually have two different statements that we're evaluating here. I have this one and this one. Now, the items that are underlined in yellow, they're either going to equate to true or false, but you can also see I've got the OR operator. The OR operator says as long as one side or the other of the OR operator is true, then we're going to call the entire statement to be true. Let's take a look. Now we know that 1 does not equal to 2. And we know that 3 is less than 4. So when I run this, the equation comes out as true and we see the statement this is true. Now when you're doing complex logic, it can be a little hard to see what things are grouped together. So feel free to throw some parentheses in there. So I surrounded this equation in parentheses. I surrounded this equation in parentheses. And just like in grade school math, the parentheses control order of operation. Now, these things are already going to execute together, but they may give you some visual reference as to what's grouped together to help you solve any logic issues. But again, this already executes correctly. And then there can be only one. So what you need to understand about an if statement that has a bunch of else ifs in it, there can only be one true statement. Let's see how this works. So here you can see that all of these are going to be true. I'm going to execute this entire batch together and let's see what happens. Now the if statement will write its font in green and the others in red. Now remember, they're all true. However, only the first one executes. So what happens is when you've got a situation like this, once you have one statement that equates to true, which in our case was this one, then anything else in the if-else-if block is going to be ignored. And then program execution will continue at the next line after you exit this construct. And that's the basics of how to use an if statement. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because in the next episode, we're going to take a look at how to use the switch statement.